Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be talking about the Beatles in my podcast. Later we're going to have a guest star and they are going to talk about the Beatles with me and I'm going to ask them some questions. I'm going to start with talking about the Beatles and their introduction. The Beatles are typically seen as four talented musicians who came together to change music and then eventually broke up. Their story was told as Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and Ringo Starr and George Harrison were designated for fame in the beginning, but a closer look, their creative research and history paints a different picture. The Beatles were not successful right away. They spent years improving their music, working hard to write new songs, and were turned down by many record labels. They were successful due to practice, creativity, competition, and teamwork. And even more fascinating, what happened after they split. Even when each member kept making music, none of them could match what they have achieved collectively. This raises an important question. What specifically sparked the Beatles' creativity? Next, we are going to talk about the environment that shaped the Beatles. Understanding the Beatles' origin is important to comprehend them. In the 1950s, the group was raised in Liverpool, England, the popular music industry dominated by American music. While Britain was still recuperating from World War II, rock and roll icons like Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Chucky Berry, and Elvis Presley had significant impact. Liverpool was unique because it was a major city port. Ships arriving from the United States brought records that were often different to find elsewhere in Britain. The city also had strong connection to American military personnel stationed nearby. Because of this, young musicians in Liverpool had greater access to American music than many other parts of the country. From a young age, Beatles were influenced by these ideas. They aspired to be like American artists, just like many young Britain artists. These were attempting to reimagine music at first. All they wanted was to be successful musicians. Although they gained experience from early apprenticeships like clubs in Hamburg, Germany, and Liverpool, they were far from the performers as we know them today. Next, I'm going to talk about how the Beatles are not immediate geniuses. One of the most surprising facts about the Beatles is that several record labels rejected them before they became famous. Today, this seems unbelievable. However, according to producer George Martin, their early material was not especially impressive. When Martin first heard their recordings, he was not immediately convinced. Their songs were simple, and many of their performances relied heavily on covers of American rock and roll songs. Their first album reflected this. Large portions of their early songs consisted of cover songs because they did not have enough strong material to make an old album. This is important because it changes the idea that genius is born in a way. The Beatles were not born writing songs like A Day in the Life or Something. They developed gradually. Their career emerged through years of practice, experimentation, and improvement. As Sideles argues, the Beatles should not have viewed as a collection of creative genius. Instead, they should be understood as a creative process. I think anyone should take inspiration from this, showing that if you love to do something, you will grow with it over time. A lot of people give up on their dreams because they aren't good enough, when the issue is that they gave up. Next, we are going to dive into the creativity and continuous improvement of the Beatles. One of the major themes in Clydesdale's research is that creativity develops over time. Many studies in creativity focus on single task performance by students in controlled environments. However, in the real world, creativity often works differently. Artists, musicians, and innovators improve through repeated cycles of learning and experimentation. The Beatles provide a perfect example of this. Their songs became more sophisticated with every album. Earlier songs focused on simple themes of romance, teenage relationships, and as they matured, their lyrics explored loneliness, identity, memory, spirituality, and societal issues. In terms of music, they pushed beyond the traditional rock and roll. Their first hit to use an orchestral instrument was Yesterday. Norwegian Wood, which was featured in the satire reflection of George Harrison's growing interest in Indian music. By the time they were recorded, Revolver and St. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, they were using record studios itself as a creative instrument. Each album was built on lessons learned from the previous projects. Their growth demonstrates that creativity is often less about sudden inspiration and more about continual improvement. Next, I'm going to be talking about John Lennon and Paul McCartney's friendly rivalship. Perhaps one of the most important forces behind the Beatles' creativity was the relationship between John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Although they worked together, they were also competitors. According to John Lennon and McCartney, each songwriter consistently tried to match or surpass the other. When one wrote a great song, the other felt motivated to write something equally impressive. This rivalry was not hostile. Both men benefited from the group's success, both respected each other's abilities. Paul McCartney later explained that if John wrote something remarkable, he felt inspired to create something just as strong. Likewise, John reacted to Paul's success in the same way. This consistent exchange pushed both musicians forward. George Martin believed that this friendly competition was one of the most important factors in their development. Rather than becoming complacent, John Lennon and Paul McCartney continually raised the standard for each other. Because they shared songwriting credit, they worked within the same group, and competition and cooperation existed the same. They were able to create songs that we love today. Next, I'm going to be talking about competition beyond the inside of the band. The Beatles were also influenced by competition in outside groups. One of the most significant rivals is an American band called the Beach Boys. During the mid-1960s, both groups were considered leaders in popular music. Each paid close attention to what the other was creating. When the Beatles achieved enormous success in America, Beach Boys songwriter Brian Wilson felt pressure to respond. This pressure motivated him to push his music in new directions. After hearing Rubber Soul, Wilson became determined to create an album that would surpass it. The result was Pet Sounds, an album that is now considered one of the greatest recordings in music history. The Beatles were deeply impressed by Pet Sounds. Paul McCartney later described it as one of the most influential albums he's ever heard. Inspiration by Wilson's innovations, and the Beatles raised their ambitions even further and created St. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. This back-and-forth relationship demonstrates how competition can encourage creativity. Instead of copying one another, both groups challenge each other and create higher levels of artist achievement. Next, I'm going to be talking about the Beatles' fame, motivation, and success. The Beatles clearly loved music, but they were motivated by external rewards, such as success, hit records, and recognition. Research discussed that Clydesdale's article suggests that external rewards do not always damage creativity. In some cases, they actually encourage people to work harder and pursue higher standards. One example of this is in the Beatles. They cared sincerely about their accomplishments, cherished chart success, and kept an eye on public reactions. But they weren't driven by money. They sincerely enjoyed honoring their art and making songs. Ambition and passion worked incredibly well together. Lastly, before my interview, I'm going to be talking about why the Beatles broke apart. Ironically, some of the same forces that made up the Beatles' success eventually contributed to their breakup. As the group matured, each member became more independent. George Harrison became a stronger songwriter and sought greater recognition. John Lennon and Paul McCartney increasingly worked separately. The close collaboration relationship that they had fueled their creativity began to weaken. At the same time, tension emerged over business decisions, personal relationships, and artistic direction. The creative system that had once united their group was changing. Eventually, the Beatles could no longer function as the same team they had been during their most productive years. In the 1970s, the group officially ended. Hi guys, this is my friend Brenna.
Hey.
She's gonna be answering some questions about the Beatles. Okay. Researcher Greg Clydesdale argues that the Beatles were not born as creative geniuses. Instead, they became successful through years of practice, learning, and improvement. Do you agree that greatness is developed rather than something people are simply born with?
I think greatness is developed rather than something that someone is born with.
Would you like to expand on that?
Yes, I would. Okay, so I feel like, at least, so I did sports growing up. How I view it is in sports, like, you can have natural talent, but you only go so far when you don't work upon that natural talent. So I think there's even people that don't have that natural talent that become better than those people that are naturally talented because they have that kind of drive. And I can kind of correlate that with this because you get better at everything through practice no matter how good you already naturally are at something. And you can put that into anything in your life, especially in this context of being an artist like the Beatles were. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. My second question is going to be, John Lennon and Paul McCartney were songwriting partners, but they also were competitors. Each time they wrote a great song, the other felt challenged to write something even better. Do you think friendly competition helps people improve?
I do. I do think friendly competition helps people improve. I think a lot of people are competitive with each other, and I think that makes it so you want to be a better person and better at what you're doing. Because, like, until it gets, like, very harsh, then it's not. But I think when you're actively pushing each other to be the best person you can, or the best artist that you can, I think that's when it really shows, and especially in their music as they continued on.
The Beatles were heavily influenced by other bands, especially the Beach Boys. The two groups pushed each other to create better music. Do you think competition between groups or companies can lead to better results?
I think so. I think it depends on the context because, it depends on how healthy it is because if they're obviously arguing, it's not going to be fun for anyone. But if it's, like, good, like, you're pushing each other to do better and continue on and growing, like, both groups want the best for each other. I think that's when it's healthy, but when they both want one of them to fail is when it becomes worse. And I don't think that's what was happening in this situation. I think they were just trying to encourage each other to continue to do better and make the world happy with their music. So, yeah.
But I agree.
I want to Capri Sun.
Real. After the Beatles broke up, all four members had solo careers. However, none of them achieved quite the same impact as they had as a group. How does this suggest the importance of teamwork?
I think it suggests that teamwork is super important because everyone has different views and opinions on what's going on, and it allows everyone to get each and every single person's point of view and put it into the songs that they're making, and along with understanding the audience a little bit more. When you tend to do things on your own, you start to forget everyone else's view and you just think of your own, so you kind of hyper focus on that. And when you're together, it's inevitable to get other people's opinions, and yeah. Low-key, all my answers are the same.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Producer George Martin played a minor role in helping the Beatles turn their first idea into reality. Some people even call him the fifth Beatle. How important do you think mentors and teachers are in helping talented people succeed?
I think mentors and teachers are really helpful for helping anyone succeed, whether they're talented or not. They help give you some kind of confidence that you may not have had in yourself, along with providing you guidance and critiques as you go. Like, no matter what you're doing, as you're learning, you're going to get better, and the people that help you learn are going to help you encourage you to become better and become more confident and in your decisions and what you're doing. And the more confident you are, the more good you're going to get at what you're doing naturally. So I think having peers and people that are going to be pushing you and teaching you is really important for anything in life. And in this specific thing with the Beatles, it helped them create better music and learn what their audience likes and learn what they like and kind of work with each other, and being able to take the criticism is super important. Yeah.
Thank you. After hearing everything we've discussed, what do you think the biggest lesson people can learn from the Beatles story?
That you should never back down from a challenge, and you should also always speak up. I think the Beatles have always represented speaking up for what they believe in and speaking based on the times that they've been singing in, and I think that's super important. It helps a lot of people realize that they aren't alone and that they have a voice, even if they're not the ones exactly speaking it, and that they're heard. Yeah.
Well, that's the end of my podcast today. Thank you, guest star Brenna. And that is it. Bye.